The council chamber stretched across 3 levels, filled with representatives from 247 different species. Some breathed oxygen. Others, methane. Some had scales. Others had fur or skin that shimmered like oil on water. They had gathered here for centuries to make decisions that affected trillions of lives across 12 spiral arms of the galaxy. Today, they voted to expel humanity. Ambassador HFY stood in the center of the chamber, her hands clasped behind her back. She wore a simple gray suit. Nothing fancy. Around her, the voices of alien counselors rose and fell like ocean waves. The Velthrons clicked their mandibles in approval. The Quarks hummed their agreement through their translator devices. Even the peaceful Dendrii, who rarely took sides, remained silent. The vote was final. Humanity had to leave. Counselor Vrex, a tall Velthron with purple carapace that gleamed under the chamber lights, stood to read the resolution. His voice boomed through the translators. Resolution 4477 is hereby passed. The human species is expelled from all concordance territories. They are given 6 standard months to evacuate. The reasons are clear. Humans are reckless. They innovate too quickly. They disrupt our careful balance. They contaminate our ancient cultures with their strange ideas. HFY listened without expression. She had expected this. The signs had been there for months. The Velthrons feared how quickly humans learned their technology. The Quarks merchants resented human traders who made friends too easily across species lines. The old powers of the galaxy wanted things to stay the way they had always been. When Vrex finished, the chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to HFY. They expected anger. They expected threats. They expected humans to fight back, to argue, to make trouble. Instead, HFY stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Thank you for 300 years of cooperation. We made friends among many of your species. We will remember the good times." She paused, looking around the chamber. "We will leave peacefully. You will have no trouble from us." The silence that followed felt heavy. Merchant Prince Killix shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Several younger counselors looked confused. This was not the response they had prepared for. HFY turned and walked out of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the vast space. No one tried to stop her. Captain Deho received the message while his ship, the Persistence, orbited the diplomatic station. He read it twice, then closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, his face showed no emotion. He had a job to do. "Attention all crew," he said into the comm system. "Begin evacuation protocols. We have 6 months to bring everyone home." The work began immediately. The Persistence was just one ship, but humanity had hundreds scattered across concordant space. Deho coordinated with other captains, with colony governors, with station managers. Lists were made. Schedules were created. 12 million humans lived in concordance territory, spread across 73 different worlds and stations. It was an enormous task. On the farming world of Keller 4, human colonists began shutting down the agricultural networks they had built. These networks fed 3 nearby systems. The colonists had spent decades perfecting them, adjusting them to work with alien crops and alien soil. Now, they packed their tools and personal belongings into cargo containers. A Dendrii farmer named Sulos watched them go. "Who will maintain the networks?" he asked. A human engineer named Tae Sung. Tae Sung looked at the vast fields spreading to the horizon. "I don't know," he said honestly. "The automated systems should work for a while, but they'll need maintenance eventually. We trained some of your people, but..." He trailed off. The truth was, the systems were complicated. Humans had a knack for keeping them running, for finding creative solutions when things broke down. "Can't you stay?" Sulos asked. "Surely. Not all humans need to leave. 5. 5 hard. 5 hard. 5 hard. 5 hard. 5 hard. 5 hard. Taesung shook his head. The resolution was clear. All humans. From all concordance territories. He placed a hand on the Dendri's shoulder. You were a good friend. Sulos. I'll miss working with you. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On research stations, human scientists said goodbye to alien colleagues. In hospitals, human doctors like Yuna transferred their patients to alien physicians and nurses. The aliens accepted the transfers, but looked worried. Human doctors had a reputation for finding creative treatments, for combining techniques from different species in unexpected ways. In the trading hubs, human merchants closed their shops. They had been middlemen between species that didn't trust each other, neutral parties that both sides could work with. Now those connections would have to be rebuilt without them. The Quarks noticed this first. Merchant Prince Killix reviewed the trade reports and frowned. Human traders had been involved in 40% of all interspecies commerce. How had he not realized that before? On the military stations, human tactical officers packed up their posts. Commander Sang-ho of the warship Defiant shook hands with his Velthron counterpart. Good luck out there, he said. Space is getting more dangerous. The Velthron officer nodded stiffly. We will manage. We managed before humans arrived. Sang-ho didn't argue. Though he knew the truth. Pirate activity had dropped 70% since humans joined the Concordance military. Human captains had unpredictable tactics that kept the criminals off balance. But that wasn't his problem anymore. As the weeks passed, the exodus continued. Ships departed every day, carrying humans back toward Earth and the other core human worlds. They left behind infrastructure, buildings, and equipment. Some aliens moved into the empty human quarters immediately. Others stood and watched the ships leave with uncertain expressions. Captain Daeho worked around the clock, coordinating the massive operation. He barely slept. Every day brought new challenges, new complications. But slowly, steadily, humanity withdrew. 5 months and 3 weeks after the vote, the last human ship prepared to depart. Ambassador Hae-won stood on the observation deck of the Persistence, looking back at the station where she had worked for 15 years. She felt tired, sad, but also something else. A strange kind of relief. We're ready, Ambassador, Daeho said quietly behind her. She nodded. The Persistence turned away from concordant space and accelerated toward the outer regions, toward the area humans called the Outer Veil. It was wild space, unclaimed and unexplored. Perfect for a new beginning. Behind them, the concordance settled back into its ancient rhythms. Most aliens barely noticed the humans were gone. Life continued, as it always had. The old powers congratulated themselves on removing a disruptive element. Counselor Vrex reviewed reports in his office and felt satisfied. Everything was returning to normal. The dangerous human influence was gone. The concordance would be stronger without them. He had no idea how wrong he was. 3 months after the last human ship left concordance space, the first problems began to appear. They were small at first. Easy to ignore. Just minor inconveniences that seemed unrelated to each other. Station Krell 9 reported a disease outbreak among the Pethalan workers in the mining sector. It was a common illness, nothing serious. The station's medical staff treated it with standard protocols, but instead of getting better, the disease spread. Within 2 weeks, 40% of the station's population was sick. The chief medical officer, a Quarix named Illith, reviewed the treatment records in confusion. We're following all the correct procedures, she said to her assistant. The medication should be working. Her assistant pulled up older files. Dr. Yuna handled a similar outbreak last year. Her treatment was different. Illith read through Yuna's notes. The human doctor had combined medications from 3 different species. She had adjusted dosages based on individual patient responses rather than standard charts. She had used something she called intuition to guide her decisions. The medical computers hadn't recommended any of those actions. But they had worked. This makes no sense, Illith said. How did she know to do this? The assistant had no answer. They tried to replicate Yuna's treatment, but without understanding why she had made those choices, the results were poor. The outbreak continued to spread until they had to evacuate part of the station. On the farming world of Keller 4, the agricultural networks started failing. Sulos, the Dendrii farmer, stood in his field and watched the irrigation systems sputter and die. He called the maintenance team. The Velthron engineer arrived and examined the system. "The primary pump is overheating," he said. "We need to replace it." "Reston, we need to replace it." "Can't you fix it?" Sujas asked. "The specifications say replacement is the only option." Sulos remembered Tae-sung, the human engineer who used to maintain these systems. Tae-sung never replaced anything. If he could fix it, he would take the pump apart, find the problem, and solve it with whatever materials he had available. The Dendri had watched him fix a critical valve using parts from 3 different machines and a piece of scrap metal. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. "The replacement pump will take 6 weeks to arrive," the Velthron engineer said. "Nothing I can do." The crops in that sector began to die. Without irrigation, the careful balance that fed 3 systems started to collapse. Sulos filed a complaint with the Agricultural Council, but they had no solutions. The human who designed the system was gone. The humans who maintained it were gone. The aliens who remained didn't have the same instinct for creative problem-solving. In the research station orbiting Nexus 7, scientists worked on a quantum field experiment that had been running for 2 years. The human physicist who started it, Dr. Hyun-sik, had left detailed notes. But when the equipment started showing anomalous readings, the alien scientists couldn't figure out what to do. Hyun-sik's notes say to feel the resonance pattern, a Quark scientist said, his translator device making his frustration clear. "What does that mean? How do you feel a quantum field?" His colleague, a Velthron, shook her head. "Humans always wrote things like that. Intuition. Feel. Try this." They didn't follow proper scientific method. "Yes, but their experiments worked," the Quarks pointed out. 67% of our new discoveries in the last 10 years came from human-led projects. They stared at each other, suddenly understanding something they had never noticed before. Humans didn't just follow the rules. They played with possibilities. They tried things that shouldn't work, and somehow made them work anyway. The quantum field experiment collapsed 3 days later, destroying months of data. Merchant Prince Killix sat in his office reviewing trade reports, and his satisfaction from 3 months ago had turned to worry. Commerce between the Velthron Empire and the Pathalan Confederation had dropped by 30%. These 2 species had been trading for centuries, but they didn't trust each other. Human merchants had been the neutral middlemen, the ones both sides could work with. Without humans, old suspicions returned. Velthran traders accused Pathalan partners of cheating. Pathalans claimed Velthrans were price gouging. Small disputes became major arguments. Trade routes that had flowed smoothly for decades now sputtered and stalled. Killix tried to mediate, but neither side trusted the Quarks either. Everyone suspected everyone else of trying to gain advantage. The careful network of trust that humans had built began to unravel. On the frontier, the problems were worse. Pirates and raiders had been quiet for years, kept in check by Concordance military patrols. But those patrols were less effective now. The human tactical officers who used to coordinate the fleet operations were gone. A Velthron admiral named Croth 9 reviewed the latest raid reports with growing frustration. "They hit 3 convoys this week," he said to his staff. "How are they evading our patrols?" "They're using unpredictable attack patterns," an officer replied. "They don't follow standard raiding tactics." Croth 9 understood the problem immediately. The pirates were using human-style tactics now. Random strikes, unexpected approaches, creative use of terrain. The Concordance military trained in traditional warfare, with structured formations and predictable strategies. Humans had brought chaos and creativity to combat. And it had worked. Now the criminals were learning those lessons, while the Concordance fleet stuck to the old ways. "Contact Commander Sang-ho," Kroth 9 ordered. Counselor Vrex started receiving reports about these problems. At first, he dismissed them. Coincidences. Minor issues. Nothing to worry about. But the reports kept coming, from different sectors, about different problems. A medical crisis here, engineering failures there, research projects stalling, trade disputes escalating, military inefficiency increasing. He called a meeting with other council members. Merchant Prince Killix attended, looking worried. So did representatives from a dozen other species. "These are temporary adjustment issues," Vrex insisted. "We functioned perfectly well before humans arrived. We will function perfectly well again. But did we?" A young Dendrii counselor asked quietly. "I've been reviewing the records. Innovation rates dropped significantly in the century before humans joined us. They rose dramatically after. Our economy was stagnating. They revitalized it. Our military was struggling with new criminal tactics. They solved that problem. They reving the problem. They rolve criminal tactics. Humans were junior members," Vrex said firmly. "They were not essential." Killix spoke up. "Perhaps not essential individually, but their approach was unique. They took risks we would never take. They tried solutions we would never consider. And somehow, it worked. We don't need their recklessness," Vrex said. But his voice lacked conviction. Meanwhile, in the outer veil, humanity was busy building something new. Captain Deho, now promoted to admiral, oversaw the establishment of 12 new colonies. The humans had found a cluster of habitable worlds in unclaimed space, and immediately started terraforming and building. Ambassador Hei-Wan visited the first colony, named New Harbor. She walked through streets that hadn't existed 3 months ago. She saw farms already producing food, factories already manufacturing goods, research centers already operating. "How are we doing this so fast?" she asked the colony governor. "We're not following the standard procedures," the governor replied with a slight smile. "We're doing it the human way. Try things. Fix problems as they appear. Move fast and adapt." Hei-Wan understood. Without the Concordance's strict regulations and ancient protocols, humans could work at their natural pace. They could innovate without asking permission. They could take risks without committees debating for months. She felt a strange emotion. Not quite happiness, but something close. Freedom, maybe. Back in Concordant space, the problems continued to multiply. Station Krell 9 finally contained its outbreak. But only after losing a quarter of its population to evacuation. Keller 4's agricultural yield dropped by 40%. 5 major research projects were abandoned. Trade disputes escalated into trade wars between 3 species. Pirates grew bolder every week. And slowly, very slowly, some aliens began to realize something important. They had taken humans for granted. They had assumed humans were just another species, unremarkable except for their annoying tendency to break rules. They were wrong. Humans had been the glue holding many things together. Their adaptability, their creativity, their willingness to take risks and try new approaches had become essential to how the Concordance functioned. But pride prevented most aliens from admitting this, especially Counselor Vrex, who had championed the expulsion. He looked at the reports on his desk and refused to make the connection. These were just temporary problems. Everything would return to normal soon. It wouldn't. 10 months after humanity's departure, the Concordance faced its worst crisis in 5 centuries. What had started as scattered problems had grown into a cascade of failures that threatened the entire Galactic Union. The agricultural collapse came first and hit hardest. Keller 4 was just the beginning. Across 17 farming worlds, crop yields dropped by an average of 53%. The irrigation systems, the soil treatment networks, the pest control grids, all of them had been designed or heavily modified by human engineers. The aliens who inherited these systems could maintain them when everything worked normally, But when problems arose, they couldn't find solutions. On Keller 4, Sulo stood in his dying field and tried not to cry. The Dendri didn't cry like humans did, but they felt grief just as deeply. 3 generations of his family had farmed this land. Now the plants withered, and he could do nothing. A message came from the Agricultural Council. Food shipments would be reduced. Rationing would begin soon. Sulos looked at the message and felt something he had never felt before: real hunger might come to the Concordance. The economic problems spread like disease. Without human traders as neutral middlemen, old rivalries exploded into open conflict. The Velthron Empire and the Pethalon Confederation stopped trading completely. Each accused the other of theft and deception. Merchant Prince Kilix tried to mediate and failed miserably. Neither side trusted him, and he didn't have the human gift for making people feel heard and understood. Trade routes collapsed. Goods that had moved freely across the galaxy for centuries now sat in warehouses, going nowhere. Prices rose. Shortages appeared. Species that had been friendly neighbors began competing for resources. In his office, Kilix reviewed the disaster unfolding across his screens. His profits hadn't just declined, they had crashed. But worse than the money was the realization of what he had supported. He had wanted humans gone because he thought they took too much of the trade. Now he understood they had created the trade. They had built the networks that made everyone prosperous. "I was a fool," he said quietly to his empty office. The military situation deteriorated rapidly. Pirates and raiders grew bold, striking deep into Concordance territory. They had learned from years of fighting humans, and now used those lessons against the slower, more predictable Concordance fleet. Admiral Croth 9 lost 3 ships in a single month. The raiders hit from unexpected angles, used terrain in creative ways, and retreated before Concordance forces could respond. His officers followed all the proper tactical protocols, but the protocols didn't work anymore. "We need new strategies," one of his captains said during a briefing. "What strategies?" Croth 9 asked. "We've been fighting the same way for 1,000 years. "Exactly. The humans fought for only 300 years, and they changed everything." Croth 9 wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The truth was obvious. Human tactical officers had brought innovation to Concordance military doctrine. They had thought outside traditional patterns. Now those humans were gone, and the Concordance fleet looked ancient and slow. The frontier worlds suffered most. 23 colonies that humans had helped terraform began reverting to their original states. Atmospheric processors failed. Temperature controls broke down. Water recycling systems stopped working. On the colony world of Haven 1-2, Ji-Woo received an emergency message. She was Captain Daeho's sister, but she had stayed behind when the humans evacuated. She had married a Quarix merchant and wanted to help with the transition. Now she regretted that decision. "We have to evacuate," her husband said, showing her the atmospheric readings. "The oxygen levels are dropping. In 3 weeks, this planet won't be breathable." "Can't we fix it?" Ji-Woo asked, though she already knew the answer. "The humans who designed this system are gone. The backups are failing. We don't understand how they made it work." Ji-Woo looked at their home, at the life they had built here. Then, she started packing. They weren't the only ones. Across Haven 1-2, 10,000 colonists prepared to abandon their homes. The ships that came to evacuate them were crowded and desperate. Ji-Woo managed to get a seat on a transport, holding her young daughter close. As the ship lifted off, she looked down at the colony. From space, she could already see the atmospheric storms beginning to form. In a month, Haven 1-2 would be uninhabitable again. Refugees from failing colonies flooded into stable systems, creating new problems: housing shortages, resource strain, cultural tensions. The Concordance had never dealt with a refugee crisis on this scale. They had no idea how to handle it. Cultural problems emerged too. Subtle but devastating. Entertainment options dwindled. Humans had produced 60% of the new music, literature, and games in the concordance. Their art had been fresh, different, and exciting. Now there was nothing new. Just the same old content, from the same old sources. Morale across the concordance dropped. People worked, ate, slept, but there was no joy. No excitement. No sense that tomorrow might bring something wonderful and unexpected. That had been the human contribution, the feeling that anything was possible. In the council chambers, emergency sessions ran day and night. Arguments broke out between species that had been allies for centuries. Everyone blamed everyone else. The Velthrans blamed the Quarks for trade manipulation. The Quarks blamed the Velthrans for military aggression. The Phalans blamed both of them for everything. Councillor Vrex tried to maintain order, but even he could see the concordance was fracturing. The unity that had lasted millennia was breaking apart, and he didn't know how to stop it. A young counselor, a Dendry named Mira, stood during one particularly heated session. "Stop!" she shouted. "Everyone stop! We all know what the problem is. We're just too proud to say it." The chamber fell silent. Vrex glared at her. "Counselor Mira, you are out of order." "We need the humans back," Mira said simply. "That's the truth. We expelled them, and everything fell apart. Our pride destroyed us." "The humans were junior members," Vrex shouted. "They were not essential." "Then explain the agricultural collapse," Mira said calmly. "Explain the trade wars. Explain the military failures. Explain why 23 colonies are being evacuated. Explain why we're all sitting here arguing instead of solving problems." She looked around the chamber. The humans would have solved half these problems by now. Vrex wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The evidence was overwhelming. Still, he couldn't bring himself to admit error. "We will solve these problems ourselves. We do not need humans." "Perhaps," Mira said quietly, "but it will take us decades to learn what they knew. How many more will suffer while we learn?" The council adjourned with nothing resolved, but Mira's words spread through the concordance. People began asking uncomfortable questions. What had they really lost when the humans left? A group of progressive counselors decided to take action. Without official approval, they sent a delegation into neutral space, requesting a meeting with humanity. Ambassador Hei-1 agreed to meet them on a neutral station. She arrived with Admiral Deho and several advisors. The alien delegation included Mira and a few others who had opposed the expulsion. They met in a simple conference room. No ceremony, no formality. "We want to discuss the possibility of humans returning to the concordance," Mira began. Hei-1 listened politely, then shook her head. "No. Please," Mira said. "We understand we made a mistake. We're suffering without you. You voted to expel us," Hei-1 said, her voice hard. "You called us reckless, dangerous, contaminating. You wanted us gone. We left. We're not coming back, but people are dying." One of the other delegates said, "Colonies are failing. The concordance is collapsing. That is not our responsibility," Admiral Deho said quietly. "You made your choice. Now you must live with it." The delegation tried to negotiate, offering concessions and apologies. Hei-1 remained unmoved. Finally, she stood. "This meeting is over. Humanity is building something new. We're not interested in returning to a place that didn't value us." As the human delegation left, Mira felt despair settle over her. She had hoped for a different response, but she understood it. Why would humans return to people who had rejected them? Back in the Outer Veil, humanity continued to thrive. New colonies flourished. Technology advanced rapidly without the Concordance's restrictive protocols. Admiral Deho established treaties with new alien species, ones that had never joined the Concordance. The Terran Alliance was taking shape, and it looked nothing like the ancient, rigid Concordance. Hei-1 watched humanity's expansion with mixed feelings. Part of her was still angry about the expulsion. Part of her was sad for the Concordance's suffering. But mostly, she felt relief. Humanity was free to be itself now, without constant criticism and fear. In Concordance space, The collapse continued. More colonies evacuated. More systems failed. More conflicts erupted. And through it all, a hard lesson was being learned: you don't know what you have until it's gone. 2 years after the expulsion, the Concordance had become a shadow of its former self. The proud galactic union that had lasted for millennia now struggled to keep basic services running. But something unexpected was happening. Some aliens were finally beginning to understand what had been lost. Dr. So Young sat in her small apartment on the station Nexus Prime, reviewing data for her research project. She was human, but she had stayed behind when the others left. As a xenoanthropologist, she wanted to observe what happened when humanity departed. She had married a Velthran scientist and received special permission to remain. Now, 2 years later, she was ready to publish her findings. The report was titled The Human Factor: An Analysis of Socio-Economic Collapse Following Species Expulsion. It was dry and academic, but the contents were explosive. So Young had documented everything: the agricultural failures, the trade collapse, the military inefficiency, the innovation, drought. But more importantly, she had identified why humans had been so important. It wasn't any single thing they did. It was how they thought. Humans had adaptability built into their nature. They had survived on a death world called Earth, where nature tried to kill them constantly. They had learned to think creatively, to find solutions that shouldn't work but did. They took risks that other species would never consider. They combined ideas from different fields in unexpected ways. Most importantly, humans had emotional intelligence that let them connect with almost any species. They could make the rigid Velthrans laugh. They could calm the aggressive Pthalans. They could inspire the cautious Dendri to try new things. They built bridges between cultures that would never have connected otherwise. Humans were the lubricant that made the Concordance machine work, So Young wrote in her conclusion. Without them, friction increased until the machine began to break down. Her Velthran husband, Ket 7, read the report and felt something unfamiliar: shame. He had voted to expel humans. He had believed they were dangerous. Now his own human wife had proven how wrong he had been. "I'm sorry," he said to her. So Young looked at him with sad eyes. "I know, but it's not me you need to apologize to. It's the 12 million humans you forced to leave." The report was published in the Concordance's main scientific journal. Within days, it had been downloaded millions of times. People read it and saw their own experiences reflected in the data. The farmer who couldn't fix his irrigation system. The doctor who couldn't treat her patients. The trader who couldn't make deals work. The soldier who couldn't stop the raiders. They all understood now. Humans hadn't been the problem. They had been the solution to dozens of problems the Concordance didn't even know it had. Counselor Mira shared the report with every member of the council. She demanded they read it. Some did, and felt regret. Others, like Vrex, refused to admit error even in the face of overwhelming evidence. "This is one human's biased opinion," Vrex said dismissively. "It proves nothing. It proves everything," Mira countered. "Open your eyes, Vrex. Look at what we've become." But Vrex couldn't. To admit error would be to admit that his entire career, his entire life's work, had been based on fear and prejudice. That was too much for him to bear. Meanwhile, the Concordance had begun watching humanity's progress in the outer veil. Long-range sensors and trading ships brought back reports that seemed impossible. In just 2 years, humans had established 40 colonies. They had made contact with 6 new alien species and formed alliances with all of them. They had developed 3 revolutionary new technologies. Their economy was growing at 15% per year. Their population was booming. The contrast with the Concordance couldn't be more stark. Where humans thrived, the Concordance struggled. Where humans innovated, the Concordance stagnated. Where humans built new friendships, the Concordance tore apart old ones. Admiral Croth 9 received intelligence reports about the human military. The Terran Alliance fleet was small but extremely effective. They had fought off pirate attacks with ease, using the same unpredictable tactics that now plagued Concordance ships. But more than that, they had helped their new alien allies establish their own defenses. "They're sharing their knowledge," Croth 9 said to his staff. "They're teaching others to be like them," one of his officers nodded. "While we kept our knowledge secret and controlled, we wanted to maintain power. They want to share strength." Croth 9 thought about that for a long time. He had spent his entire career believing the Concordance way was superior, ancient, tested, reliable. Now he wondered if that reliability had just been another word for stagnant. On Vrex's homeworld, the situation had become desperate. Food shortages were severe. The economy had collapsed. People rioted in the streets. Vrex's own family had lost everything. His son had sent him an angry message. "You did this. You expelled the ones who could have helped us." Vrex tried to fix the problems, but he didn't have the tools. Every solution he proposed was based on traditional methods, and traditional methods weren't working anymore. The world needed creative thinking, adaptability, and risk-taking. It needed humans. In a moment of desperation, Vrex made an anonymous request for humanitarian aid. He didn't expect an answer. Why would humans help the people who expelled them? But 3 weeks later, a ship arrived. It was human, flying the flag of the Terran Alliance. It carried food, medical supplies, and engineers willing to help repair critical systems. Admiral De Ho led the mission personally. Vrex went to meet them at the spaceport, wearing a disguise so no one would recognize him. He watched as humans unloaded supplies with quiet efficiency. They set up relief stations. They began treating the sick. They asked nothing in return. A human doctor named Mi-sun was treating refugees in a temporary clinic when Vrex approached. She was exhausted, having worked for 16 hours straight, but she smiled when she saw him. "How can I help you?" she asked. Vrex's translator device struggled to convey his emotions. "Why are you here? We expelled your people. We called you dangerous. We forced you to leave." Mi-sun continued working as she talked. "Because you need help. Because people are suffering. Because that's what humans do. We help when we can." She looked up at him. "We don't have to like you to see that you're in pain." Vrex felt something break inside him. All his pride, all his certainty, all his belief that he had been right, it crumbled. He removed his disguise and stood before her as himself. "I am Counselor Vrex," he said. "I was the one who championed your expulsion. I wrote the resolution. I convinced others to vote for it." Mi-sun studied him. She should have been angry, but she just looked tired. "I know who you are. My parents lost their home because of you. They had to evacuate when their colony failed." "I'm sorry," Vrex said. The words felt inadequate. "Sorry doesn't fix what broke," Mi-sun said quietly. "But it's a start." She returned to her work. "If you really want to help, get me more medical supplies. The shipment we brought won't be enough." Vrex did exactly that. He used his position to expedite shipments, to cut through bureaucracy, to get the human relief workers whatever they needed. It was the least he could do. News of the human relief mission spread across the Concordance. Some aliens felt grateful. Others felt humiliated that they needed help from the species they had expelled. But everyone noticed one thing: humans hadn't gloated. They hadn't demanded apologies. They had just helped. That quiet dignity affected people more than anger ever could. Back in the council chambers, the progressive faction grew stronger. More counselors admitted that expelling humans had been a mistake. They debated what to do next. Some wanted to beg humans to return. Others wanted to demand they return, claiming the Concordance had a right to their help. Counselor Mira shut down that second idea immediately. "We have no rights here. We made our choice. Now we must make a better choice, admit we were wrong, and ask, humbly, if there is any way to repair what we broke. But will they come back? Someone asked. I don't know, Mira admitted. But we have to try. Not because we need them, but because it's the right thing to do. In the Outer Veil, Ambassador Heywan received daily requests from concordance systems asking for trade, for help, for knowledge. She accepted some requests and declined others. The Terran Alliance would help those who showed genuine respect and humility. Those who demanded or expected help received nothing. Admiral Deho discussed the situation with her one evening. They're learning, he said. Slowly. But they're learning. Do you think we should go back? Heywan asked. Deho shook his head. No. Not as subordinate members. Not as junior partners. If we engage with the Concordance again, it must be as equals. They must understand that we're not coming to save them. We're building our own civilization, and if they want to be part of that conversation, they need to approach us with respect. Heywan agreed. Humanity had moved on. The question was whether the Concordance could move forward too. 5 years after the expulsion, the galaxy looked very different. The Concordance had survived, but barely. It was smaller, weaker, and fundamentally changed. Humanity had thrived, building something new in the Outer Veil. And slowly, painfully, both sides were learning to coexist in a new way. The Concordance's reformation had been brutal. 3 species left the Union entirely, deciding they could do better on their own. The remaining members had been forced to change everything about how they operated. Counselor Mira, now the leader of the Reformed Council, stood before representatives from across the Concordance and announced the new policies. We will encourage innovation, not restrict it. We will value adaptability over tradition. We will promote cross-cultural cooperation. And most importantly, we will never again expel a species out of fear. 1. The changes were revolutionary for the ancient Concordance. Educational systems were reformed to teach creative problem-solving. Military academies started training officers in unpredictable tactics. Trade regulations were simplified to encourage entrepreneurship. Scientists were given freedom to experiment without endless committee approvals. They called it human-style thinking, though they had learned it the hard way. On Keller 4, Sulos watched as his farm finally recovered. It had taken 3 years of hard work, but the new generation of Concordance engineers had learned to maintain the systems humans left behind. More than that, they had learned to modify and improve them. They would never be as naturally creative as humans, but they had learned creativity could be taught and practiced. We're getting better, Sulo said to his son, who was studying agricultural engineering. Maybe not human good, but better than we were. His son nodded. My professor says humans didn't have magic. They just practiced thinking differently. So we practice too. That attitude was spreading across the Concordance. Humans hadn't been superhuman. They had just approached problems from a different angle. And that angle could be learned, even if it took time and effort. Counselor Vrex had resigned from the council shortly after the human relief mission to his homeworld. He spent the rest of his life trying to repair the damage he had caused. He wrote extensively about his mistakes, hoping others would learn from them. He became, in his final years, one of humanity's strongest advocates. I was wrong, he said in a public address broadcast across the Concordance. I let fear guide me. I let pride blind me. I hurt millions of people because I couldn't admit that a younger species had something to teach us. I cannot undo my mistakes, but I can spend my remaining time ensuring no one repeats them. His apology didn't erase the harm he had caused, but it helped. Many Concordant citizens took his words to heart and began examining their own prejudices. Meanwhile, the Terran Alliance had grown into a force that rivaled the Concordance itself. 70 human colonies spread across the outer veil. The 6 alien species that had joined the alliance brought their own worlds and populations. Together, they created something unique, a federation based on mutual respect and shared innovation rather than ancient tradition and rigid hierarchy. Admiral Deho commanded a fleet of 200 ships, protecting Alliance space from pirates and hostile forces. But the fleet wasn't just human anymore. Ships from all 7 Alliance species worked together, learning from each other, combining their strengths. This is what the Concordance could have been, Deho said to his multi-species command staff. A true union of equals, not a collection of subordinates following ancient masters. The economic success of the Terran Alliance forced the Concordance to take notice. Trade between the two powers grew, though it remained limited. Humans were willing to trade but cautious about deeper involvement. They remembered the expulsion too well. Ambassador HFY, now in her late 50s, had become the chief negotiator between the Alliance and the Concordance. She met regularly with Counselor Mira and other reformed Concordance leaders. The meetings were professional, but distant, cordial, but not warm. "We want to propose a formal treaty," Mira said during one meeting. The Treaty of Distant Neighbors. It would establish peaceful coexistence, regulated trade, and mutual defense agreements. HFY reviewed the proposal carefully. It was fair. More than fair, actually. It recognized the Terran Alliance as an equal power. It promised no interference in each other's internal affairs. It established protocols for cooperation during emergencies. "What about membership?" HFY asked. "Are you inviting us to rejoin the Concordance?" Mira shook her head. "No. We understand you've moved beyond us. We're not asking you to come back. We're asking if we can move forward together, as separate but friendly powers." HFY felt something loosen in her chest. That was the right answer. "I'll present this to the Alliance Council." The Treaty of Distant Neighbors took 6 months to negotiate. Both sides wanted to get it right. When it was finally signed, the ceremony was simple and dignified. No grand declarations, no flowery speeches, just 2 powers agreeing to respect each other and cooperate when beneficial. Part of the treaty included technology sharing. Humans would provide some of their innovations to the Concordance. In return, the Concordance shared their ancient scientific knowledge, which was considerable despite their lack of recent innovation. Both sides benefited. The treaty also included humanitarian provisions. If either side faced disaster, the other would provide aid. No questions asked. No payment required. Just help, because it was the right thing to do. 3 years after the treaty was signed, a plague struck the Velthron homeworld. It was a new disease, fast-spreading and deadly. The Concordance medical teams tried to contain it but struggled. They sent a request for help to the Terran Alliance. Dr. Mi-sun, now one of the Alliance's top medical researchers, led a team to the Velthron homeworld. She brought new treatment protocols and medicine developed from combined human and alien research. Working with Concordance doctors, they contained the plague in 6 weeks. Vrex, now very old and near death, sent her a message. "Thank you. You saved my people despite what we did to yours. I will die knowing there are beings in this universe with more grace than I had." Mi-sun read the message and cried. She had lost so much when humans were expelled: her childhood home, her parents' livelihood, her sense of belonging. But she had gained something too, the knowledge that she could help others even when they had hurt her. On the frontier between Concordance and Alliance space, a new generation was growing up. Children of both sides met on trading stations and border worlds. They played together, learned together, made friends without the baggage their parents carried. A young human girl named Unseo met a young Velthron named Trex at a station school. Trex was Vrex's grandchild, carrying the family name with a mixture of pride and shame. Unseo's parents had been expelled from their home when she was a baby. The 2 children became best friends anyway. They didn't care about old grievances. They just liked each other. One day, Unseo's mother came to pick her up and saw her daughter playing with the Velthron child. For a moment, old anger flared. Then, she saw how happy Unseo looked. She saw Trex's parent watching with the same complicated expression. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. An understanding. "We can't let them repeat our mistakes," Unseo's mother said. Trex's parent nodded. "They're already better than we were." The two parents stood together, watching their children play, and hoped the next generation would heal what their generation had broken. Ambassador Hei-1 retired at 63, having served humanity for 40 years. On her last day, she recorded a message for the archives, to be saved for future generations. "We were hurt badly when the Concordance expelled us," she said. "For a long time, I was angry. I wanted them to suffer, as we suffered. But I learned something important: revenge doesn't heal wounds. Building something better heals wounds. We didn't return to the Concordance to save them. We built our own path. And in doing so, we showed them what they lost and what they could become. That was more powerful than any revenge." She paused, looking at something off camera. "The Concordance will never be what it was before. Neither will we. We're both different now. Maybe better. Maybe just different. But we're learning to exist together, as equals. With respect. That's enough." Admiral Dae-ho retired the same year. He spent his final years teaching at the Alliance Naval Academy, passing on his knowledge to young officers from all 7 member species. He taught them strategy and tactics. But more importantly, he taught them values: respect, adaptability, creativity, dignity. "Never assume you're superior to others because you're stronger or older," he told his students. The Concordance made that mistake. Don't repeat it. The galaxy moved forward. The Concordance continued its slow recovery, learning to be more flexible and innovative. The Terran Alliance continued to grow, welcoming new members and exploring new frontiers. The two powers maintained their treaty, cooperating when necessary, staying independent otherwise. It wasn't perfect. Old tensions remained. Some Concordance citizens still resented humans. Some humans still carried anger about the expulsion. But generation by generation, those feelings faded. New people came along who only knew the treaty era, who couldn't remember a time when the two powers weren't cooperative neighbors. On a border station 50 years after the expulsion, an old Dendrii merchant named Gress told stories to young people of various species. He had lived through the bad times, the collapse, the recovery. Now he was one of the few left who remembered. "What was the lesson?" a young human asked. "What did we all learn?" Gress thought about that. "We learned that everyone has value. That differences make us stronger, not weaker. That fear and pride destroy, while respect and humility build. We learned these lessons the hard way, through suffering and loss. But we learned them." He looked at the mixed group of young people before him. "Your generation won't make our mistakes. You'll make different mistakes. That's how it should be. Just remember, you're all valuable. All of you. Don't forget that." The young people nodded, not fully understanding yet. But they would. Time teaches all lessons. Eventually, the galaxy turned. Species rose and fell. Conflicts erupted and resolved. But the treaty of distant neighbors held. Two powers, once joined and then separated, now existed side by side. Not enemies. Not exactly friends, but neighbors who respected each other and helped when needed. It was enough. Sometimes, enough is everything.